Hey guys, so this is my first video to post to YouTube. I have a little bit of free time now without a job thanks to a coronavirus quarantine. In another video I'll go over what this channel is about, but I hope you guys enjoy it. Thanks. So what we're going to be doing is going over the Wedding Banquet or the Marriage Feast of the Lamb. And in particular, in this series, we're going to focus on the Book of Esther and what exactly the typology and the shadows that are in Esther that add to the eschatology that was veiled in the Old Testament.
On the seventh day, when King Xerxes was in high spirits from wine, he commanded the 7 eunuchs who served him, Mehuman, Biztha, Harbona, Bigtha, Abagtha, Zithar, and Carcass, to bring before him Queen Vashti wearing her royal crown, in order to display her beauty to the people and nobles, for she was lovely to look at. But when the attendants delivered the king's command, Queen Vashti refused to come. Then the king became furious and burned with anger.
So the first thing we're going to look at is that 7 days that's referenced in the passage, and we're going to take a look at it as a prophetic week. Prophetic meaning 7,000 years total, 6,000 years of which we've already gone through. So the first 4,000 years being the fathers and the Jews. So from the time of Adam until Abraham was 2,000 years, and the time from Abraham until Christ was 2,000 years, and the time from Christ until now is also 2,000 years. So the final day will be the millennium reign of Christ, and that day of rest. Remember in Hebrews it says the people of God still have rest in Hebrews 4, chapter 4 there. So that's what we're taking a look at as far as it being the 7th day. Now in addition to that, we know that we have the hope of a wedding to go to. So that takes place at the end of the 6th day and the beginning of the 7th day, right? So Xerxes here wanted Vashti to come to him on the 7th day with her crown on, but she refused. Now that sounds a lot like another group of people that refused to obey the commands of their Lord and ended up having their reign taken from them. Very similar to Vashti.
Since it was customary for the king to consult experts in matters of law and justice, he spoke with the wise men who understood the times and were closest to the king: Karshena, Shethar, Admatha, Tarshish, Meres, Marsena, and Memucan, the 7 nobles of Persia and Media, who had special access to the king and were highest in the kingdom. According to law, what must be done to Queen Vashti? He asked. She has not obeyed the command of King Xerxes that the eunuchs have taken to her. Then Memucan replied in the presence of the king and the nobles, Queen Vashti has done wrong, not only against the king, but also against all the nobles and the peoples of all the provinces of King Xerxes.
So I wanted to include this next section of verses because it was customary for the king to consult experts is just like God. And I want to go over to Psalms 82, which leads a lot of people to confusion because they don't understand the concept of Elohim being spiritual entities, not just God. We know that God is Elohim, but you can think of it as I am a man, right? And someone listening to this message is also a man. So the term Elohim, which is a whole nother study you're going to be going into, but Psalm 82, God presides in the great assembly. He renders judgment among the gods. Well, that word for gods, lowercase g, is Elohim. Okay? So when we're taking a look at this and we go back and look at Esther, he's seeking counsel. We know that God is called Lord of Hosts, right? Who do you think those hosts are? And he's seeking, whether it's just or not, to get rid of this queen and seek another. And that's exactly what ended up happening with the Jewish people, the Israelites. Once they rejected Christ and crucified him, and more so afterwards, when they stoned Stephen, that's when the gate was closed to them for a time, right? We know that God's going to go back to dealing with the Jews during the Great Tribulation, but it was the stoning of Stephen that really closed the opportunity for them for that time. And so we have a big parallel between the law of God and also King Xerxes here seeking the law, what must be done with Queen Vashti according to the law.
Therefore, if it pleases the king, let him issue a royal decree, and let it be written in the laws of Persia and Media, which cannot be repealed, that Vashti is never again to enter the presence of King Xerxes. Also, let the king give her royal position to someone else who is better than she.
So here we see the official decree from King Xerxes, and we also see the first real contrast between man and God. Man was unable to eventually forgive, whereas God will forgive. Xerxes could not forgive Vashti for what she's done, and she is never again to enter the presence of the king. However, with God, he is more forgiving. So remember, this is a shadow. This isn't an exact equation. But then he goes on to say, let the king give her royal position to someone else who is better than she. Now we know better than to think that we are better than the Jews.
Do not consider yourself to be superior to those other branches. If you do, consider this: you do not support the root, but the root supports you. You will say then, branches were broken off so that I could be grafted in. Granted, but they were broken off because of unbelief, and you stand by faith. Do not be arrogant, but tremble. For if God did not spare the natural branches, he will not spare you either.
Another thing to note about verse 19 is it tells us the queen will come no more before the king, and her position will be given to another. That is how Esther became the bride of the king, and that is precisely how Christ's church will become his bride.
Mordecai had a cousin named Hadassah, whom he had brought up because she had neither father nor mother. This young woman, who was also known as Esther, had a lovely figure and was beautiful. Mordecai had taken her as his own daughter when her father and mother died.
So we're told about the adoption of Esther to Mordecai, and this makes me think about a verse in Romans 8, verse 5.
The Spirit you received does not make you slaves, so that you live in fear again. Rather, the Spirit you received brought about your adoption to sonship. And by him we cry, Abba, Father. Now the king was attracted to Esther more than to any of the other women, and she won his favor and approval more than any of the other virgins. So he set a royal crown on her head and made her queen instead of Vashti. And the king gave a great banquet, Esther's banquet, for all his nobles and officials. He proclaimed a holiday throughout the provinces and distributed gifts with royal liberality.
So there's three things in this passage to note. First, we have the replacement of Vashti with Esther. Now, I wouldn't go as far as to say replacement theology is accurate, because they have replaced the church over the Jews, but rather it's a dispensation, a separation in time, and that is one difference here. Another thing is he set a royal crown on her head instead of Vashti. We too receive crowns. We receive 5 different crowns. And the last thing here is he throws a banquet for her. So the banquet is what we think about. The banquet is a feast that happens.
The days are coming, declares the Lord, when I will make a new covenant with the people of Israel and with the people of Judah. It will not be like the covenant I made with their ancestors when I took them by the hand to lead them out of Egypt, because they broke my covenant, though I was a husband to them, declares the Lord. This is the covenant I will make with the people of Israel after that time, declares the Lord. I will put my law in their minds and write it on their hearts. I will be their God, and they will be my people. No longer will they teach their neighbor or say to one another, Know the Lord, because they will all know me, from the least of them to the greatest, declares the Lord. For I will forgive their wickedness and will remember their sins no more. Do you not know that in a race all the runners run, but only one gets the prize? Run in such a way as to get the prize. Everyone who competes in the games goes into strict training. They do it to get a crown that will not last, but we do it to get a crown that will last forever. For what is our hope, our joy, or the crown in which we will glory in the presence of our Lord Jesus when he comes? Is it not you? Indeed, you are our glory and joy. Blessed is the one who perseveres under trial, because, having stood the test, that person will receive the crown of life that the Lord has promised to those who love him. To the angel of the church in Smyrna write, These are the words of him who is the first and the last, who died and came to life again. I know your afflictions and your poverty, yet you are rich. I know about the slander of those who say they are Jews and are not, but are a synagogue of Satan. Do not be afraid of what you are about to suffer. I tell you, the devil will put some of you in prison to test you, and you will suffer persecution for 10 days. Be faithful, even to the point of death, and I will give you life as your victor's crown. Now there is in store for me the crown of righteousness, which the Lord, the righteous judge, will award to me on that day, and not only to me, but also to all who have longed for his appearing. To the elders among you, I appeal as a fellow elder and a witness of Christ's sufferings, who also will share in the glory to be revealed. Be shepherds of God's flock that is under your care, watching over them, not because you must, but because you are willing, as God wants you to be, not pursuing dishonest gain, but eager to serve, not lording it over those entrusted to you, but being examples to the flock. And when the chief shepherd appears, you will receive the crown of glory that will never fade away. Let us rejoice and be glad and give him glory. For the wedding of the Lamb has come, and his bride has made herself ready. Fine linen, bright and clean, was given her to wear. Fine linen stands for the righteous acts of God's holy people. Then the angel said to me, Write this, Blessed are those who are invited to the wedding supper of the Lamb. And he added, These are the true words of God. Esther 5. On the third day Esther put on her royal robes and stood in the inner court of the palace in front of the king's hall. The king was sitting on his royal throne in the hall facing the entrance. When he saw Queen Esther standing in the court, he was pleased with her, and held out to her the gold scepter that was in his hand. So Esther approached and touched the tip of the scepter.
Esther, dressing herself with the royal garments on that third day, is a type of rapture of the church. In Revelation, we're seeing that we're given new robes to wear, and we are clothed in robes given to us so that we may approach the Almighty. She entered the inner court of the king's chamber and stood there waiting for him to call her. She risked her life to do this. Women weren't allowed in the inner sanctuary, nor in the inner court. So that was reserved for the Levite priest to minister before the Lord. But as children of God, we have entered into the priesthood of the believers, and we are a holy body in which we minister through the Word. We do worship and prayer and works in the Holy Spirit, which are all foreshadowed in the furnishings of the inner court. And Esther faced the king's house, the entrance to the house of the Lord, was always facing east towards Jerusalem. And we're told to watch for our redemption looking east in Matthew 24. So Esther found favor in the sight of the king, is called to enter his house and place her hand upon his scepter. Right? We know that God resided in the Holy of Holies, in which only the high priest once a year could enter. So this is a depiction of the church being raptured up and before the throne of God in heaven. Her being dressed in the royal garments, facing the house of the king and receiving the call to enter, it's a beautiful portrait of the rapture. Her enemies aren't yet defeated either. Haman is still out there, and the plan to overthrow the enemy takes place at the king's house at the banquet. But let's go back to Esther chapter 5 and start at the beginning, where we're told that it is on the third day.
Esther 5. On the third day Esther put on her royal robes and stood in the inner court of the palace in front of the king's hall. John 2. On the third day a wedding took place at Cana in Galilee. Jesus' mother was there, and Jesus and his disciples had also been invited to the wedding. When the wine was gone, Jesus' mother said to him, "They have no more wine."
What's amazing is that Jesus' first miracle took place at a wedding, and our hope is that we are invited to the marriage supper of the Lamb. So huge correlation. And when you look at these two verses back to back, you know that there's a connection between the two of them.
Hosea 6. Come, and let us return unto the Lord. For he hath torn, and he will heal us. He hath smitten, and he will bind us up. After 2 days he will revive us. In the third day he will raise us up, and we shall live in his sight. Then shall we know, if we follow on to know the Lord. His going forth is prepared as the morning, and he shall come unto us as the rain, as the latter and former rain unto the earth.
Hosea is going to get its own video for sure, because this one in chapter 6 is super deep. But we see that in 2 days he will come and revive the Jews, and on the third day he will tabernacle or dwell with them.
Jesus answered them, Destroy this temple, and I will raise it again in 3 days.
We're going to look at two different meanings from this passage. The first one is more obvious when Jesus is talking about his body, that he will die and be buried for 3 days, and on the third day he will be risen. Right? Now, another meaning to that is historical, so this is an addition, that in 70 AD the temple was destroyed. Right? He says this temple will be destroyed, and that happened. Now, the third meaning of it is that with the destruction of that, and in 3 days, the beginning of the third day, so after 2 days he will revive us, and on the third day he will set up his tent, his tabernacle, and he will dwell with us. So all those are parallel meanings to the same verse. And when you apply Peter's day to 1,000-year prophecy, 2 days is 2,000 years, and the third day is the beginning of the 3,000 year, right? So 2 days. If the temple was destroyed in 70 AD, then we're looking at roughly around the 2 day mark, 2,000 years later, for that temple to begin to be rebuilt at the beginning of the third day, which correlates with the millennial reign of Christ at the end of the 6,000 years of man's government over the earth. While there's much more to the story of Esther, as far as the defeat of Haman and the Jews finding peace in the land, our focus on this video is about the wedding banquet. So I'm going to conclude this part of the study for the Book of Esther ending with those 3 days and the rapture of the church correlation. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. It is my first one, and let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below, and I'll probably keep with the theme for the series of the Wedding Banquet in more videos. Thank you.